Unpopular Front, the podcast. My name is Ben Yudishin. Let's do another episode. Let's record something. I've been sick this week. I got something from one of the kids I nanny, I believe. And I think they got it from another kid at the playground. So, playgrounds, you're dead to me. You're canceled. I'm going to find all those kids at the playgrounds. I'm going to find their germs and I'm going to make them pay. By that, I mean, let's give them health care. I don't know. Make sure they don't have to do that. I hope everyone didn't have as painful of a week as I did. I was really sick, and that was not fun. I hope people don't get sick that way. On today's episode, probably going to go pretty deep on a controversy that kind of blew up right before the last two episodes came out. And one of them, we had the great Jonathan Daniel Brown on from Struggle Session. Thanks so much, Jonathan, JDB, the man. We talked a ton about like left-wing politics and Judaism. And then like literally the next day, this whole thing with Ilhan Omar happened. So, thanks. Could have really, I mean, me and JDB already rescheduled once. We could have totally scheduled just a day later. We could have talked about it. But thanks, Omar. She's great, though. This whole thing has been exhausting. So exhausting. But also really informative and has been, honestly, kind of illuminating to me about maybe some things that I hadn't thought we were going to have to deal with as much in America. But we do. First, I'm going to play a quick clip for folks who maybe don't know exactly what was going on. It's from Democracy Now! With the great Amy Goodman and Glenn Greenwald talking about the story of Ilhan Omar and the Israel lobby.
I want to first go to one of your recent tweets that's making news today. On Sunday, you tweeted, quote, GOP leader Kevin McCarthy threatens punishment for Ilhan Ilhan, Minnesota, and Rashida Tlaib over their criticisms of Israel. It's stunning how much time U.S. political leaders spend defending a foreign nation, even if it means attacking free speech rights of Americans, you wrote. Well, Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar of Minnesota retweeted your post and added the line, "It's all about the Benjamins, baby." Then an opinion editor from the Forward newspaper tweeted, "Would love to know who Ilhan thinks is paying American politicians to be pro-Israel, though I think I can guess. Bad form, Congresswoman. That's the second anti-Semitic trope you've tweeted." Ilhan Omar then responded to that tweet by writing, AIPAC. Democratic Congressman Max Rose responded to Omar by saying, Congresswoman Omar's statements are deeply hurtful to Jews, including myself. So, Glenn, can you respond to all of this?
So that whole saga, basically, right? It comes down to a Somali-American refugee Muslim woman. Yes, she's wearing a hijab, so it's like you can point and be like, there's the Mohammedan. Do people still say Mohammedan? That feels like a very 19th century affectation. But I'm going to go hang out with the Mohammedan while I go to the Spice Slopes or whatever. I don't know. Probably some weird eugenics program will happen. But they were the progressives. It's a weird time period. Regardless of that, though. So a lot of this, it seems like it all comes down to the someone criticizing Israel. And this is a very common critique you hear of lobbying in Washington and of Israel's lobbying in particular. There are many interests who have very large lobbies, like that AIPAC would represent. We have things like farmers associations and like the corn lobby and the steel lobby and the oil lobby and the pharmaceutical lobby, and tons of different nations all have their lobbies. I mean, there's like the Turkish lobby and the South African lobby and the Indonesian lobby, But not all those states, well, some of them might be a little bit, but are as tied into sort of the imperial aspects of American foreign policy, which is a lot of it. And by having a black Muslim African woman who's a congressman, who's a citizen, to come in and to have her come in and say these things very clearly. And then instead of being, listened to and like nodded along like you would if like Thomas Friedman explained it, as a clip that was going around from 2013 was showing, or probably Barack Obama even explaining this, or AOC just a week ago in this like viral video explaining how money in politics works. This was not that different. In many ways, what Omar said was better because it was clearer, because it was like a word. It was a single point, and that's all you needed. She wasn't saying that like there's a shadowy cabal that like looks to control all of our minds subconsciously through control of the monetary supply, or that there's like these elders of Zion are hidden away in the caves and are literally controlling our politicians on strings with their Jewish horns and evil reptile magic. That's not happening. I'm not saying that that's the only form of anti-Semitism, but if you saw how people responded, you would think it would have been at least that. The forward editor that is mentioned in that should especially be ashamed of herself. Batya Ungar Sargon. She's a writer. I've seen her for ages. I didn't realize how powerful she was at Forward, which is like one of the oldest Jewish magazines, and in the past has like been progressive-ish, and even Batya Ungar Sargon has like written some good things about like racism within the Jewish community, especially like with my generation. There's a lot more mixed race Jews because, like me, you could say maybe I'm not even a real Jew and that all my criticism is actually me stepping on someone's toes, but I don't really care. My dad's Jewish. My mom isn't. A lot of people of my generation, a lot of Jews of my dad's generation married non-Jews and had mixed Jewish and not Jewish kids. So, there are conversations to be had within the Jewish community about things like race and sort of changing aspects of that. But another aspect that I think is also being missed is, and how this was like a chance maybe for some of these types in the Jewish community to really be like, all right, we're going to go for these ones. This is going to be a way we're going to get these progressive leftist Jews back on our side, And that was by invoking, it's not really identity politics, right? Because like identity politics has that root in like the 70s with the Combahee River Collective, and I don't want to take that away from them, So like the formulation I've been hearing online that seems to be like a better way to talk about it and to differentiate between like the good versions of this and the bad versions of this is there's like the like Combahee version of identity politics, which is like, Marxist and intersectional, which is our like things that are now constantly in conflict with each other, but actually like makes a lot of sense in that, in specifically the like radical black lesbian experience, post 60s. It's this formulation of identity as politics, meaning that we're supposed to just sort of take things as being self-evident because someone with this identity said it, or this person with this identity, made note that they were offended or hurt by this because of something related to that identity. And this whole Ilhan Omar thing to me kind of solidified some of my feelings in that how we talk about some of these things, specifically like being offended as an identity group, or especially in the realm of like politics and, American empire, it's an insufficient framework. And this week proved it. I saw a lot of progressive Jews, like people who are not just progressive in their Judaism, but people who are progressive in their politics, coming out. And instead of making it about, the fact that the Israel lobby does have a very strong hold on our policy towards that region. Now, some would say that it's almost like a self-licking ice cream cone, or it's like it's like an inherent part of the structure of American Israel politics and Israeli relations, in that like the current setup of Israel is a client state of America, so the interests are sort of all intertwined. So, it's not just about sort of this like Jewish identity anymore, and it's not just about like a need for a Jewish homeland, which is a reason to bring up the impact of the lobby, and then to like look at what does the lobby push for, to understand this a little bit more. I saw a lot of progressive seeming Jews, people who are progressive in their politics and are not like, orthodox, basically saying that, trying to split the middle with this Ilhan Omar situation. They would say, like, I'm thinking of the guy that AOC quote tweeted in her only real response to this issue, this guy Max Berger, who the entire time after this stuff started to happen, his narrative instantly became a very similar narrative that you would see following UK politics with Jeremy Corbyn and anti-Semitism on the left. Never mind the fact that there's like a massive growth of anti-Semitism, which is tied in with Islamophobia, in these sort of like nationalist far-right groups that are rising across the world, not just the Western world. It's a totally global thing. And you would see these progressive Jews really trying to make a point of that if the left wants to get better, if the left wants to do blah, we have to respect everyone's feelings, and we have to note when a trope has been brought out of the treasure trove of tropes that apparently everyone in the world is more psyched up about the use of a trope than like accurately describing the relations of power. That seems to be a bigger deal to people like Max Berger. Just gonna say, kind of bad, because the thing that bothers me about this, specifically with sort of the progressive Jews and those like Max Berger in his like Twitter profile says something like, he's like striving for a multiracial social democracy, which I say totally. And how the fuck are you going to do that if every chance you get, you turn it into a chance to belittle a Muslim woman in Congress about her not understanding enough, as though she doesn't have a fucking enough. She like was born in a refugee camp. English isn't her first language. And I think she's done a lot. All right, dude. So fuck off with that shit. For real. Like, I get it. You want to teach people. And yes, anti-Semitism is a huge historical problem. I'm Jewish. I understand. But there's a point where I'm going to say like a fucking white as hell kid like me, an Ashkenazi kid, like coming in being like, I'm sorry, but that was just not okay. Like, no. We got to have some goddamn party discipline with this stuff. It's a really sick incentive. I don't even think that like that Jews, progressive Jews who are probably, pretty good on Israel, even wanting to make these points, I don't think it comes from a bad place. I just think it sort of comes from just sort of like just being cued in just to different incentives I think, to like supporting and protecting politicians who like represent the movement. You know, like we can't think about these things just as like us as continued brands in that way. You know, I mean, besides the Unpopular Front podcast brand, that's a very important brand. That's the most important brand around. But do you get what I mean? Like, we can't just think about it as a chance as, you know, a slightly aggrieved party who has grown up in an American context where noting your aggrievement or your pain is, you know, it's like, yeah, I mean, Nair says in a great article, your pain as your passport. And it's just like a way to justify your own experience and then like turn that into social capital. But it's just social capital for yourself. Like, I don't really see what we're helping stop by being like, saying that there are groups of Jews who control things with money in some way is anti-Semitic. Does that mean that like bosses who are Jewish who have capital are anti-Semitic? It's just a very silly, obviously reaching point. And honestly, I expect Batya Ungar-Sargon to do this. I expect people from like, you know, liberal Jewish establishment. I expect Michelle Goldberg. I expect like all the rabbis and all of the, you know, like I expect that from them. That's not their politics. They're not aligned with Omar. They're not aligned with the, you know, new left, whatever we want to call it. But it's when I see people who are aligned and just choose to give this rhetorical, like, ammo, this capital to people who are obviously acting in bad faith. Look no further than the UK. Look no further than how they've been dealing with, like, the last person who was in that seat that Ilhan Omar had, Keith Ellison, during the DNC race for leadership. Tons of insinuations of anti-Semitism are brought up. So if you want to talk about tropes, talk about a trope of that another religious minority who's heavily racialized is being tarred as being hateful of another one, just inherently as like an essential aspect of their reality, of them being who they are. And that maybe by you playing into the fact that they're maybe offending your white Ashkenazi ass, like, maybe you're hurting them even more. And maybe you're not being just. Maybe you're just being petty. Maybe you're just like trying to just do a little pick me, raise your hand bullshit, instead of like, you know, working for that cosmopolitan, pluralistic social democracy. So we got to have more party discipline. We got to be tougher than this. You got to be. You know, there was a lot of consternation on the left around all this stuff that, you know, where's Bernie? Where's AOC? And then AOC came up. And honestly, after her statement, I was like, AOC, why'd I ask for you to show up? I get it, though, you know, and like, I don't want to be too hard on these people because then I'm literally contradicting the point I was trying to make earlier. I expect maybe the political leaders to maybe have to kind of do the bullshit a little bit, right? They're going to have to do the game. They're going to have to use some language and some framing that I don't appreciate because I think it's beside the point. You know, the way that this sort of like, for lack of this identity as politics kind of setup creates to where it's just whoever says they're aggrieved will always sort of take the point, right? And I think that at a certain point that kind of conversation and that way of addressing this stuff is just so silly and is so dangerous. Like, it might make sense for people who have less social standing and less power, but for someone like me, I feel wrong. I feel wrong doing that. Like, what do I have that's like because of my identity. There's my personal experience. There's like my experience as like a worker maybe, but like as like a white Jewish kid who grew up with a lawyer dad, like what? I'm fine, And when I see other Jews do that, I just like, it makes me really sad, because it's just like, of all the shit we've gone through in history, this is what we're worried about. And it shows me the dangers in living in the diaspora while there is like a new sort of, at least attempted recreation of a certain kind of like ancient Jewish identityness in the modern world in Israel. But to me, it just emphasizes, I think, why I think there's been so many like great artists and writers and thinkers and political activists who are Jews from the diaspora, and that there's a historical lesson for us having been cast out and having spent centuries in parts of the world where we were literally pushed to the edges of town and like in our little ghettos. Ghetto is a Yiddish word. It's our experience, right? So in that, but then coming out the other end, post-World War II, in a lot of Western countries, and even countries, I don't even know if Western is the right word, Is South Africa part of the West? I don't know. But we have been on both sides now. We've been on the underclass side, just due to who we are. And we've also become very assimilated and very successful and integrated into like the machinery of the state and the culture and the economy. Sorry, tropes. But we have such a rich history to know how to handle working with someone like Ilhan Omar, and that's to really give her the benefit of the doubt. And that's to like think about her as like your bubby, like her experience is, maybe your bubby wasn't in Congress, but like, motherfucker, like, what do you think a lot of our great grandparents were, if not refugees? We got to give our folks the benefit of the doubt because of our experience, because of how easily demonized we know you can be, being a otherized, religious, racialized minority. That's something that I did not see on display, and that bothered me. That bothered me, guys. We got to do better than that. We got to think a little bit harder. And we got to have some goddamn discipline. Bring back democratic centralism. Ironically,